and then I could lay in my bed and ask my computer to shut down, and then the computer would shut down, and I would be so happy. Have you ever heard about the acronym HMI?
Heard of HDMI, but HMI, I'm not sure actually what's that.
Human machine interface.
Could you elaborate a little?
No, it's just something you see once in a while when you talk about how to communicate and move information from a person into a computer, and how to present the information back from the computer to a person. So back in the days when you started, it would be punch card, for example. That's a human machine interface. And then we have the DOS interface, a keyboard, for instance. That's a human machine interface.
The keyboard and the screen is a input-output interface.
Yeah.
I would say they when you talk about punch card, the input would still be the keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would have intermediate input, because then you would have the punch card that you would have to feed manually into the machine, and the output then would be on a long listing, endless printout on paper.
Okay. So I thought that when you made punch cards, you basically sat with a stapler.
Yes, yes, true enough. But this particular stapler had a device called a keyboard. So every time you press the key, it would punch a hole in a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
And when you were sitting in a room, with a number of punch card writers, there would be a hell of a noise, because everybody was and then you would write one punch card would be one line of code or one line of input.
Yeah.
Basically, so a stapler punch card would constitute a file. It could either be a source file or it could be whatever input,
Okay, one punch card is one line, and each
Yeah.
row is basically a letter.
On every column you would have one byte
Okay,
defined on the whole. So and then would be 80 bytes. And then you would take them into a punch card reader that would then read where's the holes in the card here. Also, there is this thing when you make programs, even though you use the punch card, you still have to do indentation.
Okay.
I mean, I just remember a course I had on the university where we were told that anybody who delivered the program, who made the program and did not do indentation, would not pass the exam.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. So when you have 80 characters and you're making indentation also,
You're losing characters.
Become you become quite sticky, with your code. And then you get the output on paper lists. So when you go to DOS, you still have the keyboard, and then you have the screen. And when you go to Windows is also keyboard and screen. Web is also keyboard and screen. So in that context, nothing's changed.
But then we move on to the DOS interface, and my first experience with DOS was actually after I've been using Windows-based interfaces. So I got a bit annoyed that it was just this prompt that I could type things in, and I couldn't click anything, because basically we started Windows, and in Windows we started DOS and started making programs and stuff in DOS. So what I did was I learned how to print a pixel with a color on the screen when I run the program in DOS. And I used that. Basically, we had a course in C++, and I used the ASCII command in the beginning of the program to switch the screen mode to graphic, and then I could just put pixels on the screen. So I basically created my own Windows application using DOS, with some icons, and I could click, and it
Yeah.
would start another
Yeah.
kind of procedure of a function in the application. So instead of writing programs for it, I wrote functions that could execute some specific things, like a pool game or some screensaver that I played with.
Now, you're using the term DOS, which means a disk operating system.
Yeah.
And there is a dual track here, one could say, because in the university sphere, university world, there is a operating system called VM370, as far as I remember, the IBM operating system, which was also a character mode operating system. I think IKEA still use applications under that interface. Haven't you seen, with this green screen, you see it here and then, anyway.
Yeah.
And then there was Unix, which was also character mode at the time, and DOS, of course, was character mode, and CP/M was character mode. And then there was also all these, devices like Commodore 64 and the Amstrad and so on, with whatever thing was working on it, but it was character mode and not graphical.
Yeah.
And that preceded Windows. And when Windows came, well, basically it was a graphical interface based on DOS. But then again, it's actually the same thing with the Unix operating system. The X Windows part of Unix is also based on the character mode, or whatever, core of Unix.
Yeah.
If you've grown up with Unix, for instance, it's very difficult to exist without access to a shell. So you have this graphical interface, but every time you have serious problems, you start a Unix shell.
Yeah.
Or a command line interface, because then you have direct access to the operating system.
I'm probably the later generation in that case, where I tried to find things in a graphical interface, and then when I need to automate things, like write a bash script or a bat file or something that does something for me that I can execute, then I will go down to the console based. But otherwise, everything else is in Windows style.
It's called the point and click generation.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's a bit weird. But the command line based is coming back a lot within the JavaScript community, because you have this library called npm, where you have a ton of different JavaScript applications and modules and things that you can use in your projects, and also a lot of server setup. And you could say, for instance, Git. All of those are command line based first. So you run command lines to update, because it's easier to do programmatically, and you can automate it, since it's just a line of code that you can send to the console, and then you can set up an entire workspace just by putting a few lines of code in some file.
Well, you could argue that the graphical interface is a distraction, from what you actually really want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that admittedly, if there's something you haven't tried before and you don't know where to do or what to do, it's often easier to find out how with a graphical user interface. But once you know,
yeah,
then the command line interface is it's often better.
I'm not sure if you look at Git, for instance. I am primarily using the graphical interface for managing my Git repositories. But
Mm-hmm.
now when I try to do some very specific things, and I run into trouble where there are some issues with mergers, and I want to do specific things because I want to have the code base split into two or something, or forced to delete something that's on the that has been pushed or something like that. Uh, it's not easy to find that in the GUI, in the graphical interface. Um, and when you look at Google and search for it, everything you read is command line based. So then you have to go back to the command line and execute those commands, and then you can get it to working. But since you're in the command line world, all of a sudden, you have no overview of the, don't have the same visual feedback. So
No.
it's a bit more scary, I think, to do it that way. For me, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. Yeah. But then the funny thing is, as I said before, keyboard and screen has been for a very long time,
Yeah.
and is still the most widely used. Then there are some novelties. For instance, obviously the touch interface,
Yeah.
which was born out of necessity with the mobile phones and the mobile devices.
Yeah.
But also, well, I say born out of necessity, but it's also that, well, somehow the keyboard is cumbersome. One of the other things that's been tried is, to make an electronic pen. So, for instance, when you're taking notes, you just sit and write with your pen. You can make doodles and drawings in there, whatever, same time you're typing or writing down. And there's been a lot of effort in making something more efficient than the keyboard. And the funny thing is that the concept of a keyboard goes back to the beginning of the typewriters, which is, well, how long, 100 years, 150, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the concept of a pen goes thousands of years back, It's proven it works.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Then there are the interfaces that we're using right now. Microphone and speakers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's also quite good interface. I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah,
at
but
least for the kind of communications we're having.
Primarily, we are using it for human-to-human interaction. The computer is just a messenger in this case. But we have seen more, if you look at Siri and Alexa, Google Home, for instance, these are voice agents that can recognize voices and execute commands. And basically, that takes us more or less back to the console mode. They are command line based, basically. So you say one command to start a certain application, and then you can say a few phrases that application allows you to say.
Well, we're shooting a video right now, so I don't dare to utter those words, because then something will happen on my computer, being a Mac. you should be careful about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe it buys something I don't want.
There are some funny jokes where radio or TV shows where they have said something to Alexa or something, and then all the speakers in the country have been reacting to that.
But if, for instance, if you take the iPhone or the iPad, it has a speech recognition interface, and they're actually quite good. If you haven't had too much wine or beer in a night, it does understand most of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So as an input device, because I mean, you're taking notes, and afterwards, maybe some of it is gibberish, but you know what you said, so it's easier to correct it.
Yeah.
I was actually, because I was running OS2 back in the 90s. I think about 94, 95, at the OS2 version at that time on a 486 processor, had a astonishingly good voice recognition software. Only the problem was that it only went with English.
Hey.
So you could say that it wasn't so useful for non-English speaking people. And well,
I also used an application back in 2001, I think, where I hung a microphone in the ceiling of my room and then connected it to the computer, and then I could ask the computer to do some basic stuff. Mostly I used it in the evening when I listened to some audiobook, and then I could lay in my bed and ask my computer to shut down, and then the computer would shut down and I would be so happy.
That would be convenient. Yes,
yeah.
I can see the use of that. Well, actually, well, yeah, good thinking. Some years ago, I bought a device that it was looking a little bit like a set of earphones, but it wasn't. So you had one electrode that you would attach to your earlobe, and then another one to your temple on the other side, and then it would measure your brain waves, if any. And
yeah.
And
I hear you can learn to meditate using those ones.
Well, that's one of the purposes. Actually, is to set the frequency of your brainwave down to beta level, but the software that goes with it, it's mostly also about that. It's like a game. You have some fish in a tank, and you want them to swim towards you. And in order to make them swim towards you, you would have to tune into a specific frequency of your brainwave. And if you didn't, they would swim away from you.
Okay. There's a new interface that is getting more and more mature, actually. And that's neural integration to computer, where you plug a little device into your brain that communicates with the computer directly with your brain cells. And
but isn't that what's going to happen when you get this COVID vaccine?
Oh yeah, that's what most of the people are afraid of. But they say that Bill Gates is going to do that.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, but it's actually
but if we
Elon
skip
Musk,
all the stuff about the vaccine, but if you skip all the stuff about vaccine and told people that you had great games of pornography, everybody would do it voluntarily.
Yeah.
And that will come. And we would, I mean, I'll be dead by then, I hope.
Yeah. But they are actually doing trials on monkeys right now with the Neuralink. And
it's a bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah. The monkey can actually play the old game Pong using its neural implant without using a joystick or anything. It just by thinking where the plate should go on the board. So that's a bit fascinating. And that is not one directional, that is two directional. So you could send signals back into the brain as well. And then it begins to get a bit scary. How would we communicate using neural interfaces? And do we even need computers when we got neural interfaces? Yeah, probably to do some additional storage and some additional calculations, but to communicate with each other. Will it replace the cell phone? So you don't have to call someone, you just think about someone and then you will connect. There is talk about when you look at these neural integrations that people might do bungee jumping or parachuting and stuff like that, and then they can record the experience they have from that, and then you can play that experience in someone else's brain and get the same reaction, so you can get the feeling of bungee jumping without bungee jumping.
The relevant question to ask people is, have they contemplated on whether to take the blue pill or the red pill?
It sounds like a good question to end on.
If there are anyone out there who can think of interesting interfaces that we've forgotten, we'd really like to hear about it.
Yeah, I think every interface has its benefits and use cases that are relevant, but every time there comes a new interface, everyone is trying to put their things into that type of interface, even though it might not be the best case. And the format might need to change. It was like when the internet came and every newspaper wanted to have a newspaper on the internet, but that's not the format. And
exactly,
when the mobile phone came out with a browser in the mobile, everyone tried to make regular Windows applications and websites on the mobile phone, but that didn't work because there were too many limitations. So it's a different paradigm for each of these interfaces.
One of the stories, that goes about is that at Nokia's, the Finnish mobile phone producer,
mm-hmm.
They had a laugh. They were really, really laughing about Apple making a phone without a keyboard.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw it, and with that keyboard, I was thinking like, Jesus, you don't have to pay to change the keyboard if you sell it in Korea or Japan or wherever you are.
Exactly.
That's just really smart. Yeah.
And you can remove the keyboard and get the screen on the entire phone.
Yeah.
That was
I was thinking. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bigger screen. Yeah. We could use that. So that was a really smart move.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Then see you another time, because we're making so many different videos now. So I don't know when we will be talking again. But...
or it will be next week or whatever. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. See you another time.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.